Welcome back, everybody. This is David from ET Gaming, and this video I'm going to be showing how to fix material errors that you might find in your importing map process of using Charm 1.5.5. While you imported it, sometimes you might see these checker and pattern materials, and it won't output the actual material that you need. You get these weird errors that show up. So I've taken a lot of time and tried to figure out how to fix these error problems. And heads up for you, this does involve you going into a little bit of code. Nothing too crazy, but it is something we will have to fix up. I'll try to go through it as best as possible. Yet again, I'm an amateur on the code that we'll be going through. The code is going to be in HLSL code, so it is a shader code that gets converted into the Unreal Engine via the node of the custom node that is there. So yeah, I'll go through it with you and how to kind of show it and fix the problem for each errors. I think I have about like 10 or 12 errors that kind of show up constantly through all the importing of my projects that I've done. So hopefully I have a good concept and built a list of errors that occur on the regular. So but if you incur an error that I do not cover in this video, please let me know in my Discord so we can actually cover that. So, but without further ado, let's go ahead and start jumping into the video part where I kind of explain a precursor of the code. So let's jump there. Let's go ahead and cover like a standard material, particularly one that doesn't have any errors on them already. I'm just going to go through it a little bit and kind of show you what the custom node is a little bit, so when you actually jump into the code it won't be too confusing and daunting at first part. So as we look through here, you got textures that run into a custom node, and if you notice the custom node, it has these inputs that are labeled from T0 to T6 for this instance, and also after that you got TX all the way to like view direction, or dir, however it's called. In any case, these are just special nodes that are always put in afterwards. It gives nice properties to our material, and then also these textures here feed into our custom node and gives it the data that it needs to drive the material. Let's go down. I'm going to click on the custom node here. If I go down to the very bottom, you see there's an inputs that are right here, and there's indexes for this. You have T0, and then it goes so on to T1, and then it just covers all these areas here. These are the inputs that are there that allow this to get driven, and these are created automatically when you import your maps, and then it generates the materials for you. But sometimes you have errors, and that's what we're going to be covering today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the node here and do Control A and Control C. I'm going to copy all this. I'm going to open up our handy dandy notepad and Control V. So I just got the code in here, so it's a nice little spectrum spaced out for me. But I'm going to kind of point out areas of interest, so when I cover it later on in this video, you have an idea of what I'm kind of going at. So if you see the custom node here, the T0 for instance, you notice down here you get T0 to all the way to T6, that's here. Also these other inputs, these are all added at the very end of this page. And other errors that might occur, you might remove some of these because you don't need this. Like say if you didn't need like T5 for instance, you would remove that. But keep in mind, when you remove something from code, it might occur in a couple of places, and when that happens, you must remove that part as well. So if we scroll up a little bit, you might see a repetitive pattern in here, particularly from T0 to T6, and also these other 4 nodes that occur there as well of inputs. So this is like an initialization of these values here, and then the outputs are actually put down at the bottom. But if you remove one also must be removed. So that's just something to be for instance, by the way. Another thing of being involvement are these material underscore texture 2Ds, and then it has a little number on the end of it here. These numbers are fairly important later on, but I'll explain it a little bit more when it comes to it. But if you know that it says underscore T1, this is actually referring a little bit to the textures that it's controlling logic through. And it would particularly go to like texture 1 in this case. And if I scroll down here, this one is doing more logic to the T1 texture that is there. If I keep scrolling, they do stuff to T3 to 0 as well, and then so on from there. It's kind of calling to these textures, and then it's applying logic onto it, so then it can compile the shader in the way that it does here. So that's how that works. So that's a little broad overview of the code in general. I'm going to get actual into the error, like fixing of stuff. You'll know what I'm kind of getting at, but at least you have an idea of what a couple of basic things are, which are these errors here, which connect up as an input to your custom node. And if you remove one, the other has to be removed as well. Things are connected throughout this code. So yeah, let's go ahead and jump into our first error of interest. I'll see you there. So the first error that we're going to be encountering is calc pixel material inputs and output parameter pixel material outputs error code. It's a mouthful. In general, the code that's in there, it's kind of hard to describe what needs to get fixed, but this one's actually pretty simple to actually take care of. So in the code itself, what you want to do first is go ahead and go into the node and copy the code, and I preferably do 2 notepads, one with code with the original code that you didn't mess with at all, and then one with the code that you're going to mess with. So just in case if you mess with something too much, you can always go back to original state. So for this one, I'm going to go ahead and Control V and then paste my code in here, and let's go ahead and edit it now. We want to go to the area where there's a little function being called here, which is the output dot opacity mask equals 1, so and so. But in here you have a thing that says return output and semicolon. That's there. The reason why the code has a problem, it's because you're calling the return output with a semicolon inside these brackets. You don't have to understand why that's there, but what we're going to do is we're going to remove the return output and remove that out of the way, and on the very end of the bracket you want to put a semicolon there, and that should fix our problem. So what we're going to do is Control A, Control C, and then go into our code, go in the node, Control A, Control V. Now you have the code in there, and when you click off to the right, it should compile your shader, and your shader should be fixed up and ready to go. So that's the standard error that you have to do that comes in occurrence that I've noticed with this particular error that happens here. So yeah, that's how you do that one. So let's go on to the next one. Oh, and one more tip before you go into the next error. If you want to look at the meshes that are being applied with your material, what you want to do is go to your material and right click on it, and it should have an options there. You want to go to reference viewer. When you open that, on the left hand side it should show all the objects that are connected to that material. This is really nice, so you can at least view one of the objects and actually see what the material looks like on that object, so see if it looks correct or not. So that becomes valuable later on with a couple of errors that you might encounter. So just a little tip for you. So let's officially move on to the next problem. So this is a pretty easy fix to do here. This one's just saying there's an unexpected comma in an area, so I'll just show where that comma is. It's at the very bottom of the code that is there, and it's right before the TX in this scenario. Sometimes it's in other areas, but this one right there, it's just right at the bottom. So you can just remove that and put it in your code, and you're good to compile. Alright, now we're going to jump into something a little bit harder, which is the semicolon error. This one is a bit of a work, so let's go ahead and go through it real quick here. You don't have to understand the code like word for word what's going on here. It's pretty much we're removing a lot of things and then keeping some others as modified. But let's go ahead and continue here. So yeah, the semicolon error, the main thing that's happening here, if you look at the node while in the code, If you look at the very bottom of the code, there's a whole bunch of like textures being called out when there's actually just no textures in this material at all. So that will be removed. And removing that also requires you to remove the textures with the floats that are above. So go ahead and just remove those there. The next thing that occurs is a main problem. There's an extra weird bracket that occurs here. Yeah, it occurs just right there. Just go ahead and remove that one. The bracket doesn't make sense why it is there. It's just something that's extra that got generated. So yeah, that can just be removed. The next thing you want to do is we need to remove all the texture properties, material textures that are being called, because they're not calling to anything because there is no textures in this material particularly. So but before you get too hung-go on removing all the textures, there is a first protocol of textures that we remove from code there. But if you notice what I'm removing here, I'm adding a certain branch off that, which is a 0 after the equal sign and a semicolon at the end of it. The reason why I'm doing this is because the R2 dot whatever is after that, and R3 dot whatever is after that, our initializers are being called before the rest of the code is initialized. At least that's the way I'm looking at it for the most part. Yeah, don't take everything that I say for a fact. It's just the best thing that I know and what actually works. But yeah, this is important to actually leave that as a value. I just leave it as a value of 0. I don't think it changes much of anything. I played with it a little bit around, but yeah, it just keeps mostly at just 0, which is just totally fine. But that's the only areas. Other areas we can actually remove completely, and you can see here which ones I'm actually removing. And again, anything that's supposed to be material texture should be removed out of it all the way, because it's just going to be throwing up calls to that error for a material texture that's just not there. So that's why we're removing that. But once you go ahead and remove all those values and edit that stuff, and you can feel throw it back into your material, go and load it up, and it should be looking okay. By the way, for this particular material, and you might have this happen a lot for other materials that you have, it might not be worth it to go through all the work to do so. So if you view the reference on your meshes particularly, and you look at the material and it just doesn't look the way that it should, but if you want to be as much or as accurate as you can to Destiny materials and what is in there, feel free to do that. But sometimes it's not worth it, and maybe might be deleted later on. You might put something else there, so that's just a heads up for you. So yeah, hopefully I explained that one enough. It was a little difficult, but let's go on to the next error here. Alright, believe it or not, this error is actually kind of similar to the other one. So what you should see here is material, texture 2D, and then a number. On this one is undeclared. So what's happening here is the node, and if you look at the code compared to our custom node, there's just way too many textures being called that are just not there. For instance, for this one, it goes from T0 all the way to T9. But in our code, it goes all the way to like T21. So what we have to do here is move everything from 10 to 21. That's the first step to do. So let's go ahead and do that. So we remove that, and then also make sure that you remove the float values as well, because you remove one, you gotta remove the other. So remove all the T10s, the T21. So that one's pretty easy. The next thing we need to do is actually remove the material textures, 2D's numbers that are higher than 9, or T9 in this scenario. But there is a scenario in this area, and that this does occur in a lot of materials that I had experience with. It kind of goes back to the last error that we had, is there's a variable that's being called, and this is the first declaration of being called here. So it needs to be called before the rest of it gets called off. So you don't have to understand that too much, just kind of follow through what I'm doing here. So in this one, I kind of just remove that, add a 0, semicolon, right? You could take away the whole if statement, that can go away, and also all the other text materials that are that are 9 technically. So those can all be removed, and if you look through them, you can easily tell which ones are there. You know what I mean? For each particular texture. So just remove those areas there and remove all the if statements. Those are just not there and required if they're involved anything higher than that T9. So if you follow what I have here, it's very much a standard template of errors that you might run into throughout, you know what I mean, in this one. But the major case of this one is it's trying to call a texture that does not exist, and for some reason the code implemented all these textures that just don't exist in this custom node, which is totally fine. Just to make sure, as a special note, include a variable that needs to be initialized before it's initialized further down the list. So yeah, in this case I just have 0 semicolon, and it's R3 in this case. So yeah, go ahead and just do that, or whatever your case resolves. It might be an R1 dot something or an R2, however it goes there. So yeah, good luck, and I'll see you in the next error. Alright, so this error is actually very similar to the very first one that we did, which is pixel material outputs. This material, though, is kind of special because it is inquiring text to be presented in game. And that also involves masks as well. So I'm going to show you how to kind of fix this up, and we have to add an extra node to kind of get, I think, what we want. So it might change for each material that I may work on, but I think as a standard, I think this is quite typical. So let's go ahead and go from here. We want to go ahead and jump into our code first. As the same as the first error, we want to go ahead and remove the return output and the semicolon. Go ahead and remove that, and go ahead and put a semicolon at the end of that bracket that's there. Once that is done, we can go back into our node after we copy and paste our new code into our custom node value. What we want to do is go to the very right node on that side, and you go ahead and click on that, and you should see a little notification there that, going through my notes, hold on real quick. It is the blend mode that's there. You want to go ahead and change the blend mode to masked, and once you do that, you want to add a multiply node, and from there you want to plug in our main texture that's there, the RGB texture node. Plug that into the A of the multiply, and then to the B you want to do the opacity mask from the attribute material, and then from the output of there you want to go ahead and plug it into our opacity mask onto the main output. And once you have that, everything should be set up so your text should be visible, but what was behind it will not be visible. How it kind of works, that's how masks works in this scenario and on the text. So hopefully yours should look pretty good. If you want to see exactly how it looks, go ahead and view the meshes that were included, and you can kind of see how this stuff looks. So hopefully that works for you. So let's go ahead and move on to the next problem. So this error might look a little scary, considering what the error says is an incorrect number of arguments to numeric-type constructor. Don't get scared with that one. This one's pretty easy. So what we're missing is a parentheses brace that occurs in an area, or I should say that does not occur in an area. So bringing up the code here, the instance occurs right in this area, and this is very typical for a lot of the errors that I had throughout many of my materials, and it was always in this spot that's right here. Yeah, it just needs a little parentheses brace right there, and after you add it, you can go ahead and copy and then put it into our code, and then it should be fixed up. But this is a wombo combo material that has two problems. We already fixed the first one. The second one is the view direction. I did this on the previous video on how to fix it, and this one I'll show you how to fix it as well. It's the same exact process. What we want to do is remove the view direction. As you can tell here in the material, it does a weird artifact thing with the texture that doesn't really work appropriately for this material. So by removing that in the code, the verbiage for that, which is the view dir, dir, removing that, and go ahead and remove it in the other two spots which are above, one the flow area and the one that's right below that as well. Go ahead and take that verbiage out. Once you go ahead and copy and paste that code back into our custom node again, you should be good to go. Everything should be looking pretty good. So hopefully I fixed it up for you. Let's go down to the next problem. Alright, so this error is pretty easy to fix. Pretty much it's an unexpected token. It's a question mark. This one's pretty easy, so go ahead and look at the code here. The placement, that is really funky for this one. There's a very weird declaration happening here. There's an AZ in these hyphens and stuff like that. Thing is, you can replace that weird value of whatever that is into a 0, and you should be good to go. Go ahead and replace those values. Go ahead and copy, put that back into our custom node, and then it should be fixed up and ready to go. So that's how to fix that one. I was possibly considering not putting this as an error, considering that it's very, very exactly similar to the very first one, but I thought I might add it in here because in this scenario, this is a text that goes into the level itself, but it's not a masked text, so there's no masking involved. So I thought I'd just show you here what I'm going to talking about. So inside the code, it's very similar to the first error that we incurred, the very first problem. So we get rid of the return output and the semicolon, and then you want to put a semicolon and then that bracket. And then after you go ahead and put that code into our custom node again, you should be good to go, but this kind of depends also on your mesh and where does this item occurs in your level. But in this scenario, it doesn't need a mask at all, and I think it looks really good. If it doesn't need a mask, go back to the previous one where it needed a mask of just text in general. So yeah, that's this one here. Super easy to fix. Let's get on to the next one. Alright, so this semicolon error is different from the other one, but this one has a lot more work to get involved with it. And particularly with this material, I'm not exactly sure what it's for. It might be for lighting in an environment in an area, or it might be for an effect. So I'm not exactly sure, and you might not even need this, but if you do for whatever reason need this material, here is how to fix it. So the first thing you want to do is look at how many texture node inputs you have. In this case, you have one that only occurs at T0. So if you look at the bottom of the code here, you have like T10 all the way like T21 and random errors there. So go ahead and remove that. And once you remove that, you must remove the others as we've done with previous code before. So go ahead and remove the float T10, the T21. Now that we've finished up the T inputs and stuff like that, now it's time to remove the material texture 2D code that's not existing anymore. That's tied to the other outputs. So it's kind of like removing code that kind of goes into chain reaction. But we want to make sure we leave one that's there, which is the T0, and you can see the little symbol right there, which is after the 2D, it's an _0 sample level that's there. So go ahead and leave that there because that connects to our texture. That's a T0. But the other ones that are like _4, 3, and I believe 1 that's there, you can go ahead and remove those lines of code that occur there. So go ahead and do that. And now let's go ahead and remove that pesky bracket that just occurs in there randomly. Just go ahead and remove that, and that should fix up another problem that will occur if you don't remove it. And once you go ahead and remove that bracket, go ahead and copy your code, put it in there, and see what works for you. And as you can see here, actually I still have an error that I still have to fix. I didn't remove one of the material texture 2D parts of code that doesn't need to be there. So that's why it's throwing me up an error. So let's go ahead and I'll remove that real quick. There is one other little part of code that might occur in your main texture that you're going to leave there existing because you are using that texture, the T0 for instance. Towards the end of that code, you'll see something here that says to sample, the number 2, but it might mess things up. It messed it up from mine. I had to change it to a 0 for my instance. I think the 2 was kind of like using a reference for code that was removed afterwards. So you might need to change that to a 0 or a different number, or you might not even change it all. Your code might compile and it might be good to go. But for instance, if it doesn't work at all, go ahead and change it to a 0, and I think you should be good because that'll be to a null. So yeah, should be good there. Now let's go ahead and copy our code, put it in, and see what we get as a result. As you see here, we get flagged another error, which is O3 is undeclared. It's not even in the code right now. That's the problem. What it is, it's being undeclared. But it's being referenced in other places. So we need to make sure that it's declared first. So if you go up through the code here, you see other things that's called like O1, O2, but you don't see O3 in there. So let's go ahead and add O3. You have comma, O3, and make sure the semicolon is at the end of that one, and that should be good to go there. You go ahead and copy your code, paste it in there again, and now it's saying with another error, which is R2 is uninitialized. Well, the nice thing about this one is it's not undeclared, it's just uninitialized. So that means at its later process, it just needs to be initialized at some point. I like to technically do this to initialize it at the earliest point that I can. From the previous errors that we had, it's very similar to this one. What I do here, I just do R2 point W equals 0 with a semicolon at the end of that one, and then you should be good to go. Another note I want to add on top of what I just wrote down here, sometimes the .w won't be enough. Sometimes you have to do .wyz or something of that combo. That'll work. Those are initializers that are used through, I don't know whatever values that they have exactly, but if you can look through the other code there, you can kind of see use W, X, Y, Z. Just use one of those or a combo of them. That will make your code compile. Yet again, just copy and just put it into your node and see what works for you. In this case, it was just .w and it just worked just fine. All right, now our code has compiled into our material. Looking at the material itself, looks like this one is a mass material, and I think this is going to be kind of typical for a lot of materials that are created, particularly for this one that comes up with this error in the situation of involvement of fixing the code that's here. So from the previous errors that we had, it's very similar on this process. We're going to go ahead and create a mask. So on the very far right code, we need to make sure that we change the blend mode to a masked material. So let's go ahead and do that. The next thing you want to do is multiply the opacity mask by having it multiply there. And we're going to be connecting the A value with our texture that we have already there. And then the B output will connect our opacity mask, and the output will go to the opacity mask node all the way to the right. So you can see here, it's literally just taking the mask and just applying it there, and you just get this kind of like the texture that's there that's just masked out, which is just black. But I believe in this case that this material here, you might want to check in game and see what it might be. We don't know exactly. It might be a light source, it might be something else, or a V effect or something. But in this one, I think that it should be an emissive possibly, so I'm going to make that a choice to use. So what I do here is I kind of copy and paste the texture again here so I can kind of reuse it, and I do a multiply node and I connect the A value with the texture, and then the B value I just press 1 on the number keyboard, just press 1 and then left click. It will bring you out a parameter that you can use. That parameter you can put in a value. I just put it at 10 for now, and then at the output node of the multiply, I just plug that into the emissive on the very far right node. And if you go up and down with thing, like say I have it at 10, if you increase it even higher, it becomes more emissive and just brighter in contrast. So that's how that works there. Yet again, you might not need to go through all this work to create this material. It was a lot of work, and it might be something that you might not even need, because if it's a lighting functionality thing for level, which Bungie sometimes does that, yeah, it won't be needed because you can just create your own lights, you know what I mean, on your own. But if it's like a VFX thing, you might not even need to see it as well, because you could probably use Niagara or something for that to make it something better. But in this case, this is the material that I created, and this is what I can get for it actually to work. So yeah, feel free to use this as kind of like a building block of an error that you might get. And I kind of showed you the walkthrough process of how I figured out how to fix this error, and mostly all mine that I have already. So there's a lot of work on fixing some of this stuff if you have errors that kind of go on top of each other. But you kind of already covered some of those errors already, that like you have one, but one goes with the other. So it's like a combo of errors that add up together. But after you fix one, you kind of know how to fix the other because you already did it prior. So hopefully that helps a little bit with this one. I know this was a tricky one to do, so let's get on with the next one, and hopefully that will be easier. So this is a way easier error to fix compared to the last one. So the error is saying here the sample type color is incorrect. It should be a linear color. The reason why is because the texture map in here is actually a normal map. So you click on the node that's there and you go ahead and do the sample type, go ahead and change it to linear color, and then you're fixed up. You should be good to go now. So one of the last error fixes that you might come across is actually just a combination of all the errors that we have done so far, but maybe not as intense, to tell you the truth. So for this material, for instance, it had an error with a question mark on it that's leading on, so that's pretty easy. We've already done that error, so we're going to fix that real quick. Make that a 0. That's good to go. The next one, after you copy and paste that code in, you find out there's another error, which in this case is the same one, where you have to remove the return output part of code there, and then put a semicolon at the end of the bracket. Then you copy your code, put it in, and then it fixes the material. But you notice that was just errors that we already did already, but it's just kind of wombo comboed into one material. So you might see this come up a lot in your materials of errors that you already kind of taken care of so far, so you already know how to take care of it. So hopefully that helped you in this long run. So this last part of this section that I'm going over is how to enhance materials just a little bit, adding a little bit more material effects as you would to it. So let's go on and get to the last part of this video. Sometimes you might encounter materials that you need to put a little extra effort into to really make it what it needs to be. For this instance here, I have technically a rock mesh that's here, and it has moss all over it, and there's no rock really to be found. I do know for sure that this rock has moss that is on it, but not all over it. There's supposed to be a rock there, like a rock texture, and then also moss that goes right over it. So it's kind of like two materials almost put into one. So what we need to do here is go and add extra functionality to this material. So in here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in the base color into this lerp node in the B channel there, and then output that into our other base color main node that's there. And as you can see here, the moss is now on top of the rock, or at the flat surfaces is what it really should be doing of the rock, and then the rest is just the rock material, which is what it should be. To explain this a little bit more, I copied two of the textures that were already current on the material itself. I copied the rock texture and also the normal map for that texture as well. So the ones that kind of match below there, you can see which one I chose. And then I put it into a multiply, and then I plug it into the lerp node into the A channel there. The most important node that's part of this is the world align blend node. I have a couple of inputs that go into that, which are just a couple parameter values that kind of change how much of the moss is on the rock and how much rock is there on the moss, kind of going back and forth. Having those values, you can play with those to really kind of get what you want to achieve there. But the main thing is kind of blending two materials into one, and ripping stuff from charm sometimes, and then use the Python script to compile everything. It usually works a lot of the time, but you have scenarios like this where everything's not supposed to be just moss or grass or something like that. You're supposed to have a different material on top of it, and this is what worked for me. You might come up with a better solution for you, but this is the best one that I figured out. So hopefully that worked for you. Let's get on to the next one. So this material here, I'm just kind of throwing some stuff together. I really just kind of played around with it a little bit, and it kind of gave an effect that I liked. I know it's not exactly what it would be in Destiny 2 and the Leviathan raid. That's what this material is from. You might notice it already. I'm not going to go through every single node that I created here, but for the last material that I went through and this material, there's an easy thing that you can do that I found out a long time ago, but a lot of people actually just don't know about, surprisingly, is you can copy and paste nodes into other projects like really easy from like even Notepad. So I'll show you here just real quick. If I take my notes here and I copy them and then I put them on my Notepad, and then when you Control V, you see all this random mix of verbiage that's here. You don't have to understand a single word of it. All that you need to do is you would Control A, Control C, and then you go into your project with your material, and then you do just Control V in there, and all the nodes will just pop up there. So it's pretty easy to do there. So for instance, I'll have a link in the description in the bottom below for you. Go ahead and I'll have 2 text files there, one for the previous material that I just did, and one for the other one with the node structures that I used to add a little extra functionality to the material. So you can kind of replicate what I did or add on to it or do whatever you like. So have fun, have a blast with it, and yeah, let's get on to the outro. Wow, this was quite a long video, and I hope you got a lot of knowledge from this one, because this one did take a while to put together, but hopefully you enjoyed it and you're hopefully able to fix all of your broken materials. And if you did not, any broken materials that still need to get fixed, you can hit me up on my Discord and hopefully we could figure it out together. So yeah, hit me up there if you have any problems. Without any further ado, I think that's it. Thank you all for watching. I very much enjoy doing this when I can. So yeah, this is David from ET Gaming, and I am out of here. Later.